One continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And indeed, we bring you the voices, the perspectives, and of course, the stories that matter here on Africa World Hour. Let's talk now about what's been happening in Geneva. African oil and gas producing nations warning that the proposed global treaty on plastics could have serious economic consequences for the continent. The African Energy Chamber says the treaty, now under negotiation in Geneva, risks stifling industrial growth and worsening energy poverty. For more on this, so we are speaking to NJ Ayuk, Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So can you just give it to us, firstly, in broad strokes, the salient issues on why this is problematic for African countries, especially if it's supposed to be a good thing in terms of climate control?
Of course, the treaty at its inception is a good thing about climate control, reducing plastic pollution. That's a good thing. The big problem you have right now is that it is being pushed by those that have developed plastics and have developed their economies very well at the expense of African nations. So it's not about waste management or recycling anymore. It's not even about plastic anymore. It's about reducing and forcing us in a radical shift towards on climate issues that is not helping us. We have to be very careful with the African perspective, because where we sit on our economies right now, we need African petrochemicals industry, because you know why? We need urea, ammonia, NPK, fertilizer plants to drive agriculture so we can feed our people and we don't have to beg for food. We need to be able to produce plastics for our hospitals and everything. So for Africa, we should focus about treating waste management, reducing plastic pollution, rather than just getting rid of them, because when we get rid of them, we get rid of investment coming into our petrochemical sector that we need now the most, so much to industrialize. We have not industrialized. The nation that have industrialized should be taking the major brunt of this. We need to industrialize in Africa, and that's very important for this continent.
So just with what the treaty itself seeks to do, how can this message then be put across that it will stifle economic and industry growth for African countries? So are there mitigating measures that can be taken that ensures that African countries are able to pursue their own domestic economic development, while also keeping to the spirit, the intention of what the treaty wants to achieve?
That's exactly what we're trying to ask them to stick by, the essential principles of what the treaty was meant to be. We have to have a pragmatic, common sense approach, not a radical shift to really pushing this at the expense of Africa. We agree we need to reduce plastic pollution. We agree we need to do, but we cannot do it on the timelines that would radically impoverish people, that would get more into energy poverty that they already find themselves in this continent. And when we do that, we impoverish. We have a counter effect to that. We actually create more plastic pollution, because you don't have the right kind of guardians and controls that you need with plastic pollution, and that is the problem. But you need to be able to expand that across and really look at the far-reaching effect that this goes. It stifles investments from coming to the continent. And when you don't have those investments coming to the continent, then we have some real problems in this continent.
So in terms of the oil and gas deposits, which countries would then bear the brunt mostly of this coming into effect?
You're looking at countries like Angola, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Uganda, Tanzania, even Namibia, that just had big oil discoveries, is going to get hit. Mozambique is going to get hit. South Africa, that is trying to get a lot of oil going around in its orange basin, that 80% is in South Africa, 20% is in South Africa, will get hit. South Africa is a big driver of petrochemicals across Africa, and this is an African powerhouse. Africa's most industrialized nation is going to take a big hit. It would not be able to industrialize, empower Africa, and really drive up manufacturing for African people to really be able to drive these economies. They are going to face significant repercussions by this treaty if we don't get to mitigate and really have a practical common sense approach as we approach it. So it's not just we agree on the environmental concerns. We need to address that, but we cannot take a radical Western approach to it that really has a counter effect on Africans every day. That is something that is going to be dangerous. It's not something that we need to follow.
I appreciate what you said in the beginning, that what we don't want as Africa is to be dependent on donor funds or aid. So what are you saying to those that you're negotiating with to say this has been the benefit for Africa in terms of the petrochemical manufacturing industry? What have those benefits been beyond, obviously, employment, which is one of the first things that we point to?
What we've told them that the treaty at its current form needs to be rejected. It cannot pass, and it would not pass at its current form. Take, for example, Africa today is receiving wheat and fertilizers from Ukraine, a country at war, because of all these restrictions that's being placed on us. So it's gone above plastics. It's gone into investment. It's going into reducing the use of petrochemicals, and that is affecting us, because if we cannot have food in Africa, then we're in trouble. 50% of Africa would really suffer and would perish if, for example, South Africa's petrochemical industry is gone. People don't really see it because we just get their food, but we don't understand how much fertilizer, petchems that really go across this continent really drive up and feed this continent, and where we're still receiving a huge part of, we're receiving a huge part of food out of Ukraine. That is a country at war. We need to be self-sufficient. So this treaty needs to be looked from an African lens while taking into consideration global perspectives, so that we find balance and really have a treaty that we as Africans can see utilize while we protect the climate and still be able to drive our young people so that they can find jobs at home and not have to cross the Mediterranean to look for jobs on the streets of Europe. We need to grow Africa right here and right in Africa.
And I'd imagine that global supply chains has benefited from the petrochemical manufacturing industry in Africa. And I'm wondering, countries like Gabon, what lessons can be learned from them? How are they a beacon of hope for those who are pushing hard for this industry?
Look at Gabon right now. They have gone from being a very impoverished nation to using natural gas. They're producing petrochemicals. They're driving LPG. They're looking at clean cooking, reduces in pollution house, and that's going to make a big difference. Don't forget, we still have 600 million Africans without electricity. 900 million without clean cooking. We need to start using African solutions to really drive that than just pursuing a radical shift, because those that in Europe that have benefited from this and they are pushing this. It's like telling somebody that we use the elevator to go upstairs and be on the 50th floor, then look back at Africans and say, take the stairs because you don't deserve to use the elevators. And then they build it around a narrative around climate change, which we agree with climate change. But it's called global warming, not Africa warming, demands a global solution to them. And the other issue you're looking at this is that just like the Paris Agreement, most of where they promised $100 billion to poor countries and every day, most of the promises that have come out of these treaties have been broken promises. They have not really their promises. So Africans should be left alone to use what they have to do for themselves, rather than beg from Europe to give us these promises.
I'm afraid we have to end it here. We have run out of time, but thank you so much for that, your insights. NJ Ayuk is Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber.